Bill and Betty Elrod of Anderson, North Carolina. And it's about their 15-year-old Yorkie, Jackson. Jackson's a great name for a dog, don't you think? Have you ever seen a Yorkie? They're little things. They always seem to be cold. Even in the middle of summer, they're always shivering, and you have to wrap them up. They're such, delicate little dogs. And at 15, Jackson was particularly delicate. But Jackson was a very popular dog. Jackson got Christmas cards from all of his groomer, and the neighbors would send Jackson Christmas cards because they knew him from the neighborhood, from his walks. And Jackson would go out in the backyard and play. And bordering one part of Betty's and Bill's property was a horse farm and a fence. And Jackson used to go over and visit with the horses sometimes, and the horses would ninny and neigh, and they'd come over to the fence, and Jackson would dance around and bark. And so Christmas time was always a good time for Jackson. Jackson had a stocking. He knew what his stocking was. He knew when he got the stocking hung up that meant it was going to be filled with dog toys when Christmas Day came around. So on Christmas Eve, Betty and Bill and Jackson go to bed. And with Jackson, who slept at the foot of the bed with his little lammy toy in between Bill and Betty. Around 3 a.m., Bill and Betty hear Jackson whining a little bit. It's a cold, cold North Carolina night, very foggy, and they don't really want to get up. But some of you middle-aged men might be familiar with those middle-of-the-night urges that get you out of bed on even the coldest nights. So Jackson needed to go out. So Bill threw on his slippers, and he went to the back door. He let Jackson out, and he went to the refrigerator to get himself a little bit of a drink. And he went to let Jackson back in, and Jackson was nowhere to be found. He called Jackson's name. Jackson wasn't responding, and this was very unusual. Jackson used to just run out and do his business and come back. Bill runs into the bedroom, and he throws his robe on, and Betty sits up in bed, and she said, "What's wrong?" And he says, "Jackson's missing. He's outside. I can't find him. I don't see him. Let's get some flashlights and go out and look for Jackson." And they do. And they go out, and they search the backyard, and they can't find him. And they climb the fence into the farmer's pasture to look if he's over there, and they can't find him over there. And they come back, and they get in their car, and they drive around a little bit calling his name, and they still can't find him. By now, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and they come back home, and they put on a pot of coffee. And they said, "We're going to sit here, and we're going to wait until the sun comes up, and then we're going to go out and find Jackson." Well, the sun came up. They finished their coffee. They said, "Merry Christmas, let's go find Jackson." And they go out again, and they look, and it's very foggy. And they look over into the farmer's field, and in the distance, they see something, kind of a puffs of smoke or something. They can't quite tell. Again, they climb the fence like it's Mount Everest. They go over it, and they walk. And as they come closer and closer to that scene, what they see are 4 white horses in a circle. And they get closer, and they see that the clouds that they're seeing are clouds of steam from the horse's breath coming up into the air. And as they get closer, they hear some barking and some whining. And there, right at the center, where all those 4 horses' heads were together, was Jackson, being kept warm by the horses, his life having been saved by their instinct to warm him through that terrible cold Christmas Eve. And they wrap Jackson up in a blanket, and they run back into the house, and they warm him up, and Jackson is pretty much revived in a few minutes, and he's dancing around, and they give him his Christmas presents, which is a bone that he has more fun unwrapping, really, than chewing on, because the paper is so fun to tear apart. And so Bill and Betty think, well, we've got a nice story to tell our grandkids this year, don't we? And they sure did. A couple weeks later, Betty's in town. She runs into the farmer who owns the horse farm next to him. And Betty says, well, she tells him the story about Jackson and the horses. And the farmer says, well, that's a great story. That's a wonderful story, but I don't recall at that time having 4 magnificent white horses on my farm. And as a matter of fact, that night, I'm almost certain that all of my horses, none of which were white, all of them were inside the barn. So I don't know what horses you saw that night. And what Betty realized was that sometimes angels don't have wings, they have manes.